Take me through whatever it is that the administration is saying has happened with China.
Well, what they're saying and what the reality is totally different. Nicole, it's a very funny world. I love coming on your program because I love to teach economics, but it turns out sometimes what I have to do is just read the newspaper and tell the truth out loud. So, or actually read the official readouts. And so what happened was Howard Lutnick went to London. Funny place to go, London, because it was the last place he failed to negotiate a trade agreement. Met with the Chinese after we already have a deal in place with the Chinese, one that they'd struck in Geneva. And at the end of that, he announced that they had agreed, he and the Chinese, that they would each go back to their bosses to get sign-off that we would now agree that the old agreement was still the new agreement. That's the enormous breakthrough here. By the way, that old agreement that we now agree is our agreement, that old agreement was not, in fact, an agreement, but it was a pause on tariffs for 90 days. We've seen that trick before, combined with a framework for future talks that might lead to an agreement. Nicole, my parents got divorced many years ago. I'm used to this sort of lawyer speak. It doesn't bring back good memories.
What is the way that businesses take in all this information and make decisions about hiring and stocking shelves and pricing?
Yeah, this is the truly impossible part of this. We have a reasonable guess that future tariffs between the US and China will be somewhere between 0 and 145%. But where that will be and on what particular day remains very much an open question. There might be folks out there who are like my mother-in-law who wants to buy a new washing machine, but she doesn't want to pay the tariffs when they're high, but she's not sure when they'll be low again. Mm-hmm. And so folks like that are staying out of the market, and that's the sort of thing that could stop an economy. But the thing I really want to emphasize about this stop, start, on, off, here we go, merry-go-round nature of all of this is, for sure, we're going to pay the costs of tariffs. The costs are that businesses can't get the inputs they want. My mother-in-law doesn't have a washing machine, and so on. The benefits are meant to be that we build factories based on an expectation that it'll be more profitable in the future. But right now, there's no reason for anyone to believe any tariff announcement's going to last more than a week and a half. So that means we're getting all the costs of tariffs and none of the benefits.
What is amazing about bearing witness to the tariffs being announced on Independence Day, being paused when the market crashed, going back on when Trump was called a chicken or a whatever he was called first,
taco.
A coward or taco, right? The chronicling of all that does leave your head spinning, but the reality of all that is about Trump as a sort of psychological specimen. And I wonder, over time, how does the market bake that in?
Yeah, so it's a really important point that you make there. And the other thing that we've seen through this is diminished expectations and hopes. So on January 20th, when he came to power, he thought he was going to get a better deal with China than anything we'd had under Biden. That was the ambition. Then he put the fentanyl tariffs on and some other China-specific tariffs, and that then led to an escalation. There was retaliation, counter-retaliation, and up we went. So then they went to Geneva, and when they got to Geneva, all that they wanted to do was get things back to where they were on April 1st. So they struck that deal, and then that lasted all of a few days before they started yelling at each other, again, a lot like my parents' divorce. And so what we got was, when they went to London to talk, that they wanted to get all the way back to where we were on May 12th. No one's talking anymore about getting things good. They're talking about, even the Trump administration, they're talking about a set of trading conditions with China that are less bad than the Trump administration had gotten us to just a few weeks ago.
I want to turn back to the other piece of this. I mean, because I think what you just described is how they've successfully moved the Overton window, right? No one even talks about getting back to where we were on January 10th, before Trump was the president, who won, we are told, because of the price of eggs. I want to show you the deal piece of that, how that has collapsed and how that has become almost like British comedy in the way they talk in circles. I have to sneak in a quick break. We'll bring Mara in and have that conversation on the other side.
to escalate, with China stemming the flow of these key rare earth minerals, making everything from cars to airplanes. And China really controls about 90% or more of the refining capacity of these rare earth minerals that the U.S. critically relies on. And in turn, the U.S. said that it was going to revoke a lot of the Chinese student visas that initially America had agreed to. So essentially, this framework is just really solidifying what was agreed to a month ago. No concessions, though, Pam, on those higher tariff rates that we're still seeing, 30% and upwards on Chinese exports, and that 10% tariff rate on U.S. exports. This is something that obviously businesses were trying to pay attention to, seeing if there would be any breaks on that, but doesn't look like it as of now, the information that we're getting from the president.
Breaking this morning, President Trump is saying on social media that the trade deal with China is complete. In his post, the president writes, "Our deal with China is done, subject to the final approval with President Xi and me," and giving some details of what he thinks and says is going to be in there up front. CNN's Phil Mattingly is tracking this one. I mean, these talks that have been going on, hugely important, but what are you hearing about this, Phil?
Yeah, Kate, here's what matters in terms of what the president announced today, the deal that was kind of hammered out over the course of 20 hours of negotiations over 2 days between the two delegations led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on the U.S. side. What matters is what President Trump was talking about related to opening up the spigot for rare earth minerals. Now, if you're sitting there going, what are rare earth minerals? Why do I care about these things? Here's why you care. They are largely heat-resistant components that are absolutely essential to just about everything that matters in terms of kind of general life operations, technology, phones, flat screens, the power cords for your computers on one side. More critically, and what really posed an acute risk to the U.S. supply chains, U.S. manufacturers, and really global manufacturers around the world, they are critical components in the automotive industry. They are central components to a lot of U.S. and international defense weapons systems. The reason why this became such a significant issue, Kate, is that China has basically a virtual monopoly on the heavy rare earth elements that make up the most sophisticated autos and defense systems. That was a huge problem. Shortly after the April 2nd Liberation Day tariffs President Trump announced, China slapped export controls on the shipment of those elements. Essentially, they locked them up and put them behind closed doors. And when they basically produce and refine roughly 90 to 95% of the entire world's supply, that causes major, major issues. For all the ways, Kate, you've heard, I've heard administration officials talk about how they believe they have a clear kind of they're in a better place than China has ever been when it comes to the bilateral trade war that was going on. This was the one issue where China had absolute leverage. That was the driving force behind these talks. U.S. officials were frustrated. They thought that first round of talks in Geneva unlocked these rare earth minerals, or they kind of reopened the access to supply. They did not. And so what President Trump and his team were willing to put on the table is they are going to remove some U.S. export controls on critical industries. We don't know exactly which ones yet. The president announced in that Truth Social post that the student visa issue that the administration had put on the table, saying they were going to block them, that is now no longer in effect, according to the president. We are waiting to see what else specifically this deal is going to entail, but make no mistake about it, China had a clear leverage point here. They utilized it over the course of the last several weeks, and they're getting something out of this agreement in the form of U.S. export controls coming down, the student visa issue going away. There are no new tariffs as a part of this agreement. But essentially, if you want to big picture this, Kate, the most important bilateral relationship in the entire world, the two largest economies in the entire world that were essentially at a place of complete trade embargo just a month and a half ago, are now back to where they were 5 or 6 weeks ago in Geneva. That's the baseline. There's no dramatic step forward in the relationship. President Trump, in a follow-up Truth Social post, said that he and Xi will work together, Xi Jinping will work together. But it's basically back to where they were 6 weeks ago, which is better than where they were 2 days ago.
And let's hope better than where they will be in 12 minutes from now. That's exactly right. Phil, it's great to see you. Thank you.
Joining me now, former Obama White House Deputy National Security Advisor and MSNBC political contributor Ben Rhodes. Welcome back, Ben. It's good to see you. So let's talk about the expectations for Monday. You have U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who said only a conversation between Trump and China's Xi Jinping could solve the differences. So how much do these talks matter? And does China have a fundamental advantage in this trade war?
The talks always matter at the leader level with the Chinese because Xi Jinping is the ultimate decision maker in China. That's normal. These matter even more because on the U.S. side, there are multiple policies happening at once. You've got people like Scott Bessent, who clearly wants to kind of calm the markets down, clearly wants to kind of unwind the trade war that his boss started. But then you've got all kinds of Trump advisors who are spoiling for a fight, who want to escalate things. And so I think what Xi Jinping wants to do, and I think he's been quite firm with Trump, and Trump seems to have a lot of affection for Xi Jinping as a strongman. Xi Jinping wants to say, look, let's just calm this down. You need to rein in your more escalatory, if not crazy, advisors. I also think Xi Jinping, to your question, Alex, is holding a lot of cards here because in addition to the fact that the global markets are being disrupted and that led to a lot of Trump supporters putting pressure on him to unwind these tariffs, China has restricted the export of what are called rare earth materials that they have a massive global monopoly on to the U.S. And U.S. manufacturing can't really work without these inputs from the Chinese. So I think Trump didn't, he shot before he aimed in this trade war. China has a lot of leverage here, and they're trying to use it to just turn the dial back down.
Okay, but good to know. These talks on Monday, they're important. We'll be watching that closely. Let's go on to Iran now, Ben, because the Trump administration...
Trump has already lost this trade deal with China. Because here's the thing. Either it's not real. One of the comments on social media that I saw is like, does China know this deal is done? Basically saying, like, is Trump just spouting BS yet again, and then we're going to see a Chinese official tonight, tomorrow, whenever, overnight, based on the time zones, come out and say, actually, we're nowhere near a deal. It's sort of like how Trump will make these kind of comments, and then other countries will say, no, we never said that, or, we're in discussions, but we're nowhere near as far as Trump is claiming, trying to claim a premature victory. But, like, here's the thing. Either the deal's not going to happen, but even if the deal happens, it's sort of a loss. And it notes in these videos that I show you, like, Trump shot before he aimed was one of the comments. And I do think that's very, very, very well put. That, not only is the tariff war dumb in a broad sense, right? These are not surgical aimed tariffs. Even if you want to do a tariff war, it's like Trump did it in a manner that guaranteed at least a good measure of defeat. But, Republicans against Trump on social media here, so these aren't Republicans. They're not, socialists like me. They're on Trump's, at least they used to be part of Trump's party before he made it nut jobs. They say, so Trump just announced a trade deal with China in which tariffs, which we pay as consumers, will increase from 30 to 55%. Genius. Are we tired of all the winning yet? So this is a deal that somehow benefits. Maybe there's we're getting rare earth metals, whatever. What will we have? We need this for industry. Fair enough. But like the tariffs are going up. So the concerns that businesses and consumers had a day ago are going to get quite a bit worse. And so Donald's trade deal doesn't actually solve the core immediate issue of economic uncertainty and suffering in the United States. So either he loses the deal, like it falls through, or he loses the deal because China seems to be winning.